the Los Angeles Chargers versus the Houston Texans. Texans were hosting this one. Chargers make the playoffs their first year with Jim Harbaugh, which I think in and of itself was an accomplishment. And we'll get into the conversation about the Chargers. Unfortunately, not a great showing from Los Angeles here in this first game. Score of this one, 32-12. The home team was victorious. But if you're a Texans fan, you have to love how that looked. The top 5 graded players for the Houston Texans in their playoff win. Cornerback Derek Stingley Jr. up at the top of the list. What a year he is having, 93.6 overall grade. And then you love to see his running mate on the other side, Kamari Lassiter, on this list as well at number 2 with an 89.5. Wide receiver Nico Collins, as he always is, in the top 5 here at number 3 at an 88.5. Edge rusher Will Anderson Jr. at 86.9. Defensive tackle Foley Fudukasi with a 79.0. And then quarterback CJ Stroud in this game struggled himself, but hey, a win is a win is a win. 58.4 was Stroud's overall grade. On Los Angeles' side of things, safety Tony Jefferson at the very top of the list. Big secondary game here with this one. 94.9. Safety Alohi Gilman at 91.6. Wide receiver Ladd McConkey with a 91.6. What an incredible day to cap off an incredible rookie season from Ladd McConkey. There's a lot of building blocks there in that Chargers offense with him being there with Justin Herbert. He comes in at number 3. Number 4, Thierry Tart with a 79.6. And then cornerback Tarheeb Still, another rookie who really stood out this year, who played well in this game, 75.6. Justin Herbert, a 60.3. What was your stat that told the story, Dalton, as we get into this one?
So there's 2 reasons to me that this game went the way it did for the Chargers. One, when they had opportunities to really step on the Texans in the first half. They were up 6-0. Could have been a lot worse for the Texans. They weren't playing well for most of the first half, but the Chargers just couldn't finish drive, couldn't put points on the board with those opportunities, especially when you're on the road. You have to put a team away early. If they still have a pulse when they're at home and they get the momentum going, it's a problem. I think, longer-term aspect of this, okay, and my stat is this. The Chargers had 261 total yards. Ladd McConkey had 197 of them.
Yeah.
And the more, and going back and look, we're gonna dig into Justin Herbert because I got something on that too. This team, and we've seen it several times this year, they just need more weapons, right? I think the more I watch Herbert, A, under pressure from Anderson and Danielle Hunter all day long. B, nobody else getting open. Nobody other than Ladd. Nobody getting open on the outside. You saw Stingley and Lassiter there at corner for the Texans as their 2 highest graded players. They just need more. I come out of this game, and even watching the All-22 of this game, and I look at, even a team with their needs in the offseason, and I go, oh, running back, receiver, tight end. It's all 3. They just need all of it to be better. And I know Quentin Johnston had the big week last week against the Raiders, but that was the Raiders. Now you go up against a primetime secondary with these types of corners, and he didn't have a catch in this game. Ladd McConkey, 9 catches, 197 yards. The rest of the team had 5 catches for 45 and a 38.7 receiving grade. Will Dissly with 2 massive drops, one that should have been a 3rd down conversion. Yeah. The other turned into a Derek Stingley interception. Just the entire operation outside of McConkey was not there. They also only ran for 50 yards on the day. And in a close game, in a game that was 13-6 into the third quarter, I don't think it's that they didn't try. I think it's just that they don't have enough speed. They don't have enough juice at running back. I like Dobbins and Edwards, but they get you your 4, maybe 5 yards, and then they roll on to the next play. There's not a whole lot of explosive element to their running game. I just think they have to continue to support Justin Herbert with weapons. And you mentioned some of those rookies. Fantastic rookie class this year, right? McConkey, Joe Alt on the defensive side with Still and Cam Hart and Junior Colson playing a little bit this year. I think Jim Harbaugh did a spectacular job this year building this team and getting them to where they are. Now they need more weapons. So, I think there's going to be some talks about free agents. I think one of those top 2 tight ends in the draft would be a perfect fit for them, either one. They just need more. They need more than McConkey. We saw it several times this year. When they struggled to score, it was Ladd McConkey, and it was really nobody else producing. That's what happened in this game.
Yeah. Somebody in the chat already asking, hey, how is C.J. Stroud's grade lower than Justin Herbert's? Because Justin Herbert had the 3 interceptions. C.J. Stroud only had 1 in this game. It's because C.J. Stroud actually had 4 turnover-worthy plays in this game, and Justin Herbert had the 3 that he paid for that obviously became those interceptions. But C.J. Stroud did not have a good game himself. He put the ball in harm's way. He just didn't pay for it. The defense wasn't able to capitalize on all those things. So just wanted to shout that out for the people who are watching the show and getting in on the chat. I know that was going to be a big question when we revealed those grades there. So, when I was talking about, hey, Ladd McConkey, he's a part of that foundation that they get to build moving forward. I really think it's just the offensive line that they have building, Ladd McConkey, Justin Herbert, and we will get into Justin Herbert in a second, but that's a really good building block. But you're right about it. They need a tight end. They need a dominant tight end presence. They need another receiver that they could go to. Quentin Johnson had a little bit of a spurt there at the end of the season where I was like, all right, well, hey, Quentin Johnson's actually playing some decent ball. And now we get into the playoffs when it really matters most, and he has a terrible showing. And like you cannot have that. Even if you liked what you saw from Quentin Johnson during the last month of the season, if you will, the floor has to be so much higher than what it is right now for Quentin Johnson, because it feels as though, yeah, he's capable of having good games, but he's also capable of completely disappearing from your offense and being a total non-factor. You cannot have that with a wide receiver too, not in this league. It has to be a lot higher than that. So I do agree with you in that regard. To me, a stat that told the story, going to that offensive line that I think is going to be a foundation of how the Chargers are good moving forward. Holy cow, they struggled. I mean, you got to tip your hat to Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter and those guys. They're fantastic. They get paid a lot of money. They were high draft picks for good reason. They're really good football players. But you look at this offensive line performance from the Chargers. Rashawn Slater is the only offensive lineman on this team with a pass blocking grade above 56. Everybody else was below a 56. 3 sacks allowed, 18 pressures allowed, bottom 4 day all year long. So it includes obviously all the regular season in pass blocking pressure, pass blocking grade overall, and pressure percentage. Like this was truly one of the worst games. And I hate that we have to say this, because I wish we would have gotten more of what I think is the true identity of the Los Angeles Chargers in this past game, because it just felt like it was a stinker of a performance everywhere around on the offensive side of the ball. They were not. This was one of the worst days up front that they have had. It was one of the worst days that Quentin Johnston has had. It was one of the worst days that Justin Herbert, if not the worst game that Justin Herbert has had so far this season. And that just kind of sucks. And I think that, again, that stat that told the story there of an offensive line that is budding and getting better and will be a foundational piece of this team moving forward, they were bad. They were bad against the Texans, and I think that was a big point of how we got to where we did when the game was over and the score was what it was.
Yeah, it was a tough day all the way around. And again, I think there was a glimmer of hope, but when they didn't score in the first half, when they had a chance maybe to go up 13-0, 20-0, and they could have really put the Texans away by halftime, and then they gave C.J. Stroud a pulse in the last 2-3 minutes of the half. I mean, the play that obviously turned the whole game around was the fumbled snap that he ended up rolling to his right, making a huge play to Xavier Hutchinson. It just feels like, again, it's always that thing when you leave a team in a game and you don't put them away. And the Texans playing 95% of a terrible first half and going into halftime with a 10-6 lead, they had to feel fantastic about that, because the Chargers, they should have jumped on them earlier, but they just couldn't with their inability, like you mentioned, to block. They could not block Will Anderson especially, and their inability of anyone else other than McConkey to make plays. It just kind of ran out on them. And as I think the one thing we always see, we always find out, we talk about in the playoffs, the elite separating from the average or the good, but you also see from the losing teams generally all of their flaws come out, and that's what happened with the Chargers.
Who's your most impressive in this game?
I'm going with a pair of guys. I mean, these two corners the Texans have, well, they're already, with Kamari Lassiter, the way he's playing as a rookie, they're already in the conversation for the best cornerback duo in the league. Stingley might be the best corner in the league, and Lassiter has just been fantastic all season. Stingley, 10 targets, 5 catches, 62 yards allowed, but most of that was to Ladd McConkey, of course. 94.9 coverage grade, 2 interceptions, and a forced fumble that I believe the Chargers ended up recovering. And then Lassiter, 3 targets, no catches, an interception himself, a forced incompletion. I mean, You have to feel like with the Texans, because their defense has a weird feel to it where the middle's a little bit softer, the run defense. But guys like Foley Fadukasi, I think that's a big part on the inside. Somebody stepping up at defensive tackle in run defense where they've struggled all year. And getting Azeez Al-Shire back from the suspension too really helps their run defense. He's a terrific run defender. Obviously went through the controversy and Trevor Lawrence and all that, but he's a valuable piece of their defense. So better in the middle, but if you get in obvious passing situations against the Texans, that's precisely where you don't need to be, because you have Anderson, Hunter off the edges, you have Stingley and Lassiter on the outside, and they are lights out on the outside. If you're gonna attack the Texans defense, you better find the middle of the field. You better get in the slot, because if you try to throw outside the numbers, you're not going to have a whole lot of success on these two guys.
Yeah, I mean, when the career started, with those two guys going back to back with Derek Stingley Jr. and Sauce Gardner at 3 and 4 of the 2022 NFL Draft, Sauce was considered one of, if not the best corner in football through his first 2 years, really struggled this year with the Jets defense as a whole struggling, and it was sort of flipped, right? As the Texans defense was sort of coming together. Derek Stingley Jr. struggled in the first couple of years of his career, and now this year he is playing at an elite level and considered one of the best corners in football. So in the eternal debate of Derek Stingley Jr. versus Sauce Gardner, here we are 3 years into their career, and obviously both of those guys have things to hang their hat on with some really good seasons. So it's great to see. My most impressive, so down the stretch of this game, the second to last drive that the Houston Texans had. All right, so the Chargers score their touchdown, and it would have been a lot different if they actually make the extra point and don't yield the 2 points going the other way for a blocked PAT return for a touchdown. So the score was a little bit wonky because instead of a 10-point game, it was a 13-point game. So the situation wasn't as dire. But at that time, the Chargers go down 3 plays to score a touchdown. 12-25. All right, you have 10 minutes and 33 seconds is when they took over. They salted the crap out of this game. This was an icing the game type of drive. 14 plays from the Houston Texans in that drive. It started with a little C.J. Stroud 5-yard short little pass to the right, and then the next 13 plays of this drive were run plays. Now, Stroud had a couple of them. 11 of them were designed runs from Joe Mixon, and I felt as though Mixon really looked like a younger version of himself this year. Or I should certainly say in this game. He just looked like he had some extra juice, and they leaned on him fully when they needed to control the clock, when they needed to just get out of here with a win. And not only did he do that, not only did he rise to the occasion, he scored a touchdown on this drive. And he was the reason why, because I believe, what was the distance of this last run? I believe it was 17 yards. 17-yard touchdown there to cap off that 14-play drive. If he didn't score that 17-yard touchdown, we might be talking about a 17, 18, 19-play drive that was just methodical from this team, and they're very comfortable running the football and putting the ball in Joe Mixon's hands. So to me, that was the most impressive, because when they really needed to eat a ton of clock to make sure that they got out of here with a win, they were absolutely allowed. They absolutely did that and achieved that. So to me, that was the most impressive. Who's your most disappointing in this one?
For me, I'm going to go, because you're getting into the major thing here, I'm going to go with Joey Bosa. And I think it's not just this game necessarily, but the entire season, honestly, and kind of the way the last couple of years have gone with all those injuries and all of that. In this game, a 44.8 overall grade. Did have a sack in the first quarter, showed a little juice as a pass rusher in the first quarter, but 36.8 run defense grade, 13.8% pass rush win rate, which is okay. It's not spectacular. It's not what we're used to seeing from him. And I think it goes back to just, you're going to see the needs of the Chargers throughout this offseason. We talked a lot about the offense, but they're going to need help off the edge too, because Bosa, since he returned from his injury in Week 8, 53.2 overall grade. His pass rush metrics are a lot closer to solid than elite. It just feels like the injuries have taken a toll. 3 straight regular seasons, I should say, with less than 500 snaps played, and there's no way at that level of performance he's coming back. He's got a $36 million cap hit next year. If they cut him, they save about 25 of that. Maybe he comes back on a cheaper contract. Maybe he goes somewhere else as a situational kind of pass rusher, but I think this is very likely the last game that we saw from Joey Bosa, and he's really had a rough stretch the last 2 or 3 years.
My most disappointing is Justin Herbert, and really it's because Herbert had the highest overall PFF grade this season that he had ever had. I mean, he was playing so incredibly well. His 90.2 passing grade was the highest that we have seen from Justin Herbert throughout his career. And really, if you look at essentially Week 7 on, because he started the season, he was banged up, and he just was not the quarterback that we knew that he could be. And then from Week 7 on, I mean, he is elite every single week of the season, especially going into the playoffs. This past game, he had 1 touchdown, 4 interceptions, 0 big-time throws, 3 turnover-worthy plays. This was the first 3 turnover-worthy play game that he had all season. He did not have a single one before this game. This was just one of 4 games all year where he had 0 big-time throws. And certainly if you want to take it from Week 7 on, this is not even close the lowest passing grade that he has had at a 59.8 in a single game. And so to me, the reason why it's just the most disappointing is I'm not saying it's the most disappointing, and I'm not going to get up here and tell you, oh, see, I told you Justin Herbert's bad. He chokes against teams that are above 500. He chokes in the playoffs. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that. It's just overall really disappointing for a player that had a phenomenal season that this is the way it ends. And it's just he has been nothing like this since week 7, and I'm not ready to call him any sort of like a choke artist or anything like that. But it's just, to me, it's just plain disappointing that he played the way that he did.
I think everything you just said is absolutely right. Okay, we can admit that he had a bad game.
His worst game of the season.
His worst game
in the season.
Okay, cool. He has worst game of the season against a really good team on the road in the playoffs. Can we not have an existential fucking crisis over Justin Herbert? And like, all I've heard the last 2 days is, oh, well, he can't win big games. Hey, he's trash. Look at him. Like, is he even the Chargers' court? The guy has one bad game. And then I hear people go back to, oh, remember that big lead they blew against the Jags? Does he play defense? Justin Herbert plays safety? Does he blow 27-0 leads? Like, I don't.
Maybe he should have.
He was fantastic. I would argue, because you have the big 4 quarterbacks, right, that we talk about: Allen, Burrow, Mahomes, Lamar, right? Yeah. As like, those are the big 4.
Yep.
I would argue. I think it's an easy argument that Justin Herbert was 5th this year behind those guys.
Yes.
If it's no less 100%. Than top 8, you couldn't argue him out of the top 8. But I'm just like, why are we especially for a team that was ahead of the curve and likely wasn't really supposed to make the playoffs at all this year? How you could see this Chargers season as anything other than overwhelmingly positive?
I agree with you.
Because what do you want Jim Harbaugh to come in and do? Change the culture, because they're the Chargers, right? The Chargers going to charge or whatever. And Justin Herbert has a great season. Mm-hmm. That's what we wanted to see: Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert. So it didn't work in this one game, but it worked in the other 17. We have no reason, absolutely no reason, to panic about, can Justin Herbert win big games? Can he do this or that? Like you just mentioned. They got a lot of this team left to build. Mm-hmm. There's still a lot of flaws on this team. I still need help at running back, receiver, tight end, edge, and corner. And we're complaining about a team that won 10, 11 games, and Justin Herbert had his best season maybe since his rookie year.
Yep. In
his first year under a new coach. Do we not remember what the Chargers were under the last regime?
I know.
I'm with you. That's the part that's irritating me. I will sit here and say he had his worst game of the season. Absolutely didn't play well. Cool. These things happen. Any question about him being like, they could absolutely win a Super Bowl with Justin Herbert, the way they're building this. Mm-hmm. Why is this even a thought? And I've heard a ton of that the last 2 days, and it's just annoying. What is it like? What do we he's 0-2 in the playoffs. They're the Chargers. They've been 0-2 in the playoffs,
especially before this past year. You mentioned like chargering, right? Like that's the phrase or the word that a lot of people like to use for choking in the playoffs.
And we picked them each to win about 7 games or so. They weren't even supposed to. The amount of ahead of the curve they are, and what Jim Harbaugh has done this year is incredible with Herbert and with the rest of the team.
Yep.
And we got people talking about, oh, you can't win big games. The Texans are really good. Like, especially their defense and all those stars we just mentioned. These things just happen.
Texans had one of their best defensive games of the season, and the Chargers offense had one of their worst. And that's just sort of what it is. And I think Justin Herbert's going to win plenty of big games in the playoffs moving forward, especially with Jim Harbaugh as the head coach.
Yeah.
You get another good wide receiver 2 in there, good tight end, a running back that can really make things happen. We'll get there, Chargers fans. We will get there. Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you like and subscribe the video. And if you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can get one to see all the premium stats that we talked about here on the show, plus the expert betting and fantasy advice over at subscribe.pff.com. The description is also right below, so if you are not a PFF Plus subscriber, you can come one today.